Good afternoon. I hope all is well. My name is Adrian Sledge, and I'm here to share with you a sermon on my final project of Daniel chapter 1, verses 3 through 6. Many of us growing up, whether we were in Sunday school or vacation Bible school, we have learned the stories of Daniel and the lion den and the three Hebrew boys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, being delivered out of the fiery furnace. These were awesome stories that kind of laid down the foundation of our Christian journey, learning about how to have integrity and character, and being able to faithfully serve God without compromise. This is a great story that has transcended the test of time, and it's a great story to read, and it's an exciting story, one of the more exciting stories in the Bible. But the question is, how did these young men get in this situation? How did these young men even put themselves in a situation to be thrown into a lion's den or getting thrown into a furnace full of fire? And we have to go back to Daniel chapter 1 to really find the origin story of these young men. And when we read this and we study tonight, we'll find and we can what we can learn through them is how to uphold the standards of God, how to continue to hold on to our integrity and character, even when we're faced with opposition that tries to change us or steer us away from God. So let's go to work. Daniel chapter 1 is presented around the time around 600 to 605 BC. And at that time, Nebuchadnezzar II was actually the king of Babylon. And during that season and during that time, the king of Babylon decided that he was going to uh, overtake and occupy Jerusalem, or the land, the kingdom of Judah. And at that time, the king, which is Jehoiakim, he was the king. He pretty much gave up Jerusalem without a fight. But during this siege by the Babylonian king, Nebuchadnezzar and his armies, verse 1 in chapter 1 tells us that he got some of the articles of the house of God, and he carried them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God. So, in other words, Nebuchadnezzar took the furniture, he took the gold, he took the articles out of the temple of God and put it into the house and temples of this idol gods. Amen. So, do, so during this situation, as these things are being taken, the king of Nebuchadnezzar informs the master of his eunuchs that in verse 3, listen, I need you to bring some of the children of Israel and some of the king's descendants and some of the nobles, young men in whom there is no blemish, but good looking, gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge and quick to understand, who had the ability to serve the king's palace, and whom they might teach the language and literature of the Chaldeans. So now what has happened is Nebuchadnezzar is not only taking furniture, taking stuff, he is now taking people. And preferably, he decided there's a specific type of people that he wanted to bring, and those were young men. They were young men. So during this time, they wanted to get young men to retrain them, get them involved into their culture so they may be able to serve the king. But during this exile, the young men that were being exiled, Daniel, uh, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, were all a part of this exile. They were all a part of this situation. And their goal was to come in, work for the king, be servants of the king, and be adopted and conditioned for their culture. So the first thing, we get down to chapter 4. It said, young men with no blemishes, good looking, gifted in all wisdom. So there was a specific pattern what they wanted. They wanted young men who were good looking. They wanted young men who was intelligent and smart. They wanted young men who had the ability to serve, the ability to serve. And why did they get young men? Why they didn't get more experienced men? Why they didn't get men in their 30s or 40s to be able to do this job? Well, one of the things is when you start dealing with conditioning and trying to transition people into different cultures, one of the things you have to do is you want to get people who are easily influenced. And most young men, teenagers, preschool, preteens, or teenagers is or children are easily to manipulate and easily to uh, change because they're not inbred or they're not totally uh, uh, ingrained into whatever their culture is at this point. So it would have been easier to change the minds of teenagers, it been pretty much the easier to control. Also, when you're dealing with younger children, 14, 15 years old, the possibility of rebellion is low with younger, where if you would have got people who have been in Jerusalem and serving God for over 30, 40 years, who have been battle tested, who have been seeing some things. And so it would have been easier to try to get them at a place where um, hey, we can train and try to easily manipulate them, and change them into what they needed to be. So then, not only he gathers them, he brings them back to Babylon, and one of the first things they want to do in verse 5 is that, and the king appointed for them daily provisions of the king's delicacies and the wine which he drank. So the first thing to help with this change and to pull them away from their culture and who they are is to change their diet. The diet is so important because you got to understand in Leviticus and in Deuteronomy, the book, God gave the people of Israel a specific diet. He told them what they can eat and what they could not eat. Amen. And by changing a person's diet, it takes them away from what they've already done. That was one of the things. If uh, getting somebody to eat your food is a form of control. It is a form of control. It's a form of a relationship, building and bonding relationship. So by giving them the food that we eat, we're asking these young men to turn away from the relationships they had before, which was with God and their Hebrew people, and to establish a relationship with the king. Also, some of the diets of the Babylonians consisted of meat, eating pork and horses. And Hebrew children, Hebrew people were forbidden from eating from eating pigs. They were eating forbidden from eating certain meats. Amen. It wasn't that they had issue with drinking wine, but however, also God had forbid that they eat anything that was used for sacrificing other gods. So Babylonians would eat the remains of foods or whatever of the sacrifices that they did to their idol gods. Also, the wine they drank was part of the sacrificing rituals to their god. So what what the king was trying to do was, let's get them away from what they normally do. Let's get them from what they eat and pour and have them violate the customs of what God told them not to eat and what God told them they can't put in their bodies. So this was a part of conditioning, because in order to get them to follow your rules, in order for them to actually work in the palace, you have to condition them. And he did it for 3 years. It was a 3 year training period. Listen, it wasn't something they were trying to do overnight. It was something they were trying to do within a couple of months. But Nebuchadnezzar and this palace, they had a commitment, a 3 year training commitment. And it says right here, in 3 years of training for them, so at the end of that time, they might be able to serve before the king. So this whole process, there was going to be a process of not just months, but a process of years of reprogramming these young men to eventually forget about their past, forget about their culture, and adopt a new thing for their lives. Then we get to who was among them in verse 6. And like we talked about, it was Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Those people that we know as Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, those who we grew up knowing them by the name. For many of us, we didn't even know what their real names was. We didn't even know what their real names was at one point. But we're going to talk about that. Why change their names? And what it said was they changed their names from the sons of Judah. They changed Daniel name to Belshazzar, Hananiah to Shadrach, to Mishael, Shadrach, and Azariah to Abednego. It is very important that we understand that the changing of the name is pretty much trying to change an identity. The male Hebrew name was very important. It was very what's the word I want to say? It was very instrumental that the name had to be fit the individual. Amen. The name had to fit the individual to the point where uh, it had some meaning and their name connected them to God. Amen. The name connected them to God. And for many of us, we have to realize that your name has meaning and it attaches you to a certain thing in your life. Amen. And every name that was given to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah had meaning. So the name Daniel meant God is my judge. God is my judge. Hananiah meant the Lord has been gracious. Mishael means who is like God. And Azariah's name was healed by God. So every male was attached to God. Their name was attached to God. It had meaning. It had importance. It was their identity. Amen. And what Nebuchadnezzar wanted to do was he wanted to strip them of their names, do anything to disassociate them from God. And what was so crazy is the specific name that were given them had meaning that would make them, if they answered to this, and many of us, what you learn is that if you answer by any other name, that's what people will call you. It says not by what people call you, but what you answer to. And they wanted them to answer these other names. Because the first thing, which was insulting to me, not only changing their name, but Daniel's name was changed to Belteshazzar. Belteshazzar means Bel or lady protect the king. So not only you took this male Hebrew name and took it away from him, you gave him a woman's name. The ultimate disrespect, you gave him a woman's name, a female name, lady protect the king. Then Hananiah, he names him inspired by Aku. Michelle, he named it the Meshach, which means belonging to Aku, which are these are Greek, these are idol gods. These are idol gods that Babylonians serve. And then Abednego means servant of Nego, another god. So, but basically, what the purpose was to disconnect them from the Hebrew God and connect them to their idol God. And names can gain ownership. It creates ownership. It creates control. It creates control. And that is why it's so important that we don't compromise who we are. Keep some type of level of integrity. And that is the purpose of in the program of what Nebuchadnezzar does. And that's what the enemy does in our lives. It tries to disconnect us from God by giving us things that God told us to stay away from. Amen. But praise be to God, if we get to verse 8, and Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the food. He would not drink of the wine. And he challenged them. Hey, if you give us this food, we won't eat that, we'll be better. And praise be to God because of Daniel's faith. And these boys did not compromise eating the different food. That was their response. The boys responded, the Hebrew boys responded by not eating that food, not compromising. And God showed them favor. God showed them favor, and they were elevated. They were elevated as leaders in King Babylon and King Nebuchadnezzar's court. That is so awesome. And I'm about to bring it to close. I only got 15 minutes. But we learn in this story that we must uphold integrity. We must uphold character. We must be stand firm, no matter what condition or what position we find ourselves in. We must stay fast, stand fast, and we must continue to uh, follow God's plan and follow God's path. And under no circumstances, walk away from the attributes and the laws of God, no matter how much the world try to get us to stray. Listen, we're done. I pray that all of you are well. I pray that you was able to get something out of this lesson. May God bless you and may God keep you.